Oh, thank you.
I
Thanks,
think
Rob.
we actually have that as item number 8 on the latest agenda.
Oh, you're right. You're right. You're right. There's another version of the agenda. Supporting, no, skipping that.
Is that
Do you have
in
the, hey, Mark, do you have the other agenda? The printed one?
I printed
Oh,
it.
okay. Got it. Yeah, one with your best.
Too late.
Okay. Soltis.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having us. Good to be here as always. I'll start on page 9, which is our 401k calendar for 2019. So if you're looking at page 9, again, on the left-hand side, those are all the services in which we're contracted to provide services to the plans. And I think just point out a couple of things. We'll talk a little bit today. We lay these out by each quarter, so of course if there's some of these that we need to move up or move back, we certainly can. One is fee policy statement, obviously as July 1st is the effective date of the new fee structure with Prudential, so we've brought an updated fee policy statement that reflects how the participants, how the fees are allocated and how the revenue share is handled, so we'll review that quickly. To point out as well, we had our fiduciary training, our annual fiduciary training in March, and we know that we had good representation from the committee members that were there. We'll, for those of you that weren't there, we'll talk about a couple of best practices that we trained on at that session. The collectives that we've been in discussion about for the last few months are in process, and we'll update on those as well. And then I think, of course, we'll go through the entire menu of the investment menus for each of the plans. I'll just point out, obviously, each quarter we go through that. Each time we come, we go through and look at what we refer to as the quality of the investment managers in your plan. If you look over there under investment reviews and updates to the far right, you'll see from our results and performance. Currently, the average excess return of the managers in your plan is about 0.83%. So again, that's just a number that we measure. Every manager has a benchmark that we expect them to outperform and add value above and beyond their expenses or their fees. So on average, it's just under 1% of excess return. And then percent of the time that those managers are beating that benchmark is about 76% of the time. So those are metrics that we watch closely and monitor, obviously, to try and ensure that we've got good performing investments within the plan menus for the participants to use. Any questions on the business calendar in terms of any items that are not there or that we need to prioritize or move up or move back? One that I failed to mention is the 401A merge, and we're going to plan to give Kelly and Prudential plenty of time today to make sure and just go through that and talk through implementation and operationally what kind of happens there, and make sure the committee is, if they have any questions, you can ask and get them answered. If we go down to page 12, obviously a big part of one of the things that we do as part of our services is be able to provide education and training to the members of the committee that serve as fiduciaries for the plans. Part of the training that we held in March was to look at recent court cases. One in particular, New York University, is a case that went through in 2018 that had some really important things that came out of it, just from a legal standpoint. We spent some time on that, but I think there's some really good best practices that Fred Reich and some others have highlighted that came from that case that we want to just take a few minutes on. I think one is, as we look through these best practices, these are things that obviously, since we've been engaged, we're working hard to work with the committee and make sure these practices are happening. But I think as you look at these best practices, I think we feel confident that the Utah County is working alongside with us to ensure these are happening. So the New York case, probably one of the reasons it gathered so much attention was because it has a lot of common denominators to most committees. Some of the things that we highlighted, if you look at that court case, they had a couple of committee members that testified in court that while they were on the committee, they also had lots of other roles. They were busy. This wasn't their only function. They weren't experts. I think they share a lot of the sentiments that probably most committee members feel. There was even a few statements made there of one committee member even testified that he wasn't even sure he was on the committee, which I'm confident that everybody on the committee here at Utah County knows they're on the committee. And if you're not sure, you're here, so you're on it. But some of the best practices that came out of that, the court actually ruled in favor of New York University. So they found that they were prudent in what they were doing. But they found that prudence was acknowledged to these best practices based on a number of different things. But probably the top 5 that really came to light out of that court case is 1, the committee and the advisor and the plan, they were holding regular meetings. And so these particular plans were meeting quarterly or sometimes semi-annually. But they were showing that they were meeting consistently to try and make sure they were watching the plans and doing what they should be doing. That's obviously something that's happening here. Fred Reish's recommendation around that was at the very least at semi-annually. So every fiduciary committee that's overseeing these type of benefits should be meeting at least twice a year to review and look at the plans. Number 2 was formal fiduciary education. This one's a little bit unique. This is something that is a lot of, I think for us, we don't see a lot of our competitors that actually do what we do, but we realize that as fiduciaries, you guys need to receive training, and where to go and get that is not as easily accessible as some other things, and so it's one of the reasons that we do 3 of them a year. Obviously, the one that we held in March is our annual training. I know that a number of you are registered to attend our training next week, May 23rd, so that'll be our 2nd fiduciary training for the year. And then we'll do a 3rd on November 14th. Again, recommendation there is at least annually that members of the committee and fiduciaries are being trained annually on what their fiduciary responsibilities are and how they fulfill them. The 3rd there is an engaged expert advisor and committee members. So one of the best practices here is the advisor that was on these plans was engaged. It was an advisor that could show that they were handling plans of this size and magnitude. And that they were performing their role adequately. So the advisor was very engaged, even when there were quarters that the committee wasn't meeting. They were running reports. It's something that we do. So every quarter, we obviously meet, but we also run the full reporting suite and document what's happening there. One of the things as well is we submit every year to an annual audit by the CEFIX organization. They're actually in our office, not this week, but the next, for our 2019 annual audit. So currently we're certified by CEFIX. That's a third party that comes in and obviously audits the fiduciary practices that we employ. And we fully anticipate being recertified in 2019, and we'll let you know once that's completed. Number 4, best practice is benchmark at appropriate levels. I think what's interesting here is it's a good reminder. ERISA law does not require, and I know that these plans are not subject to ERISA, but the law doesn't require that you have to select a low-cost provider. That's not part of the process that they're saying. Is you don't have to always use the cheapest option, but you should be looking at and making sure that your fees are reasonable and competitive, commensurate with the services that are being provided. And that should be done on every 3 years at least. Or when change in circumstance suggests monitoring should be done. So if we see tremendous growth in a plan, something like that, whether or not it's been 3 years, probably should indicate a time to do that. Now, at Soltis, our best practice, we do it actually every 2 years, 18 to 24 months. So, and of course, we did that initially when we were asked to kind of do a review of the plan. And of course, as we went through the RFP process last year for the record keeping, there's full documentation of the benchmarking and fee structure that's obviously going in place here in July. So, and then the last one is adherence to investment policy statement. So one of the allegations was that they had a couple of underperforming funds in the New York plan or the NYU plan and that weren't being monitored. And actually their investment policy statement, those funds, they followed the monitoring criteria that were in place. And so even though those funds actually didn't perform quite well or they performed pretty poorly, they were still within the guidelines of their IPS, and so the court ruled in favor as well. So again, just wanted to take a minute on those best practices. I know we went through and spent a fair amount of time, but this has been There's a lot to learn out of this particular case, and in terms of things that committees need to be doing, and obviously from our standpoint, as fiduciaries to 100-plus plans, these are best practices that we watch very closely to ensure that we're doing and meeting not only the bare minimum, but even exceeding in a number of places. Questions on that at all? Okay.
No?
One of the follow-up items that we had was to, from the last committee meeting, was to look at and provide an estimated expense budget for 2019. That's been provided on page 17. And Lindsay, are you there? I know she's on mute, just in case, but Lindsay, are you there? She was, maybe not. We went through page 17, just obviously as far as that action item.
Hey, I'm here. Sorry.
Perfect. Lindsay, do you want to take just a quick minute and just go through that estimated expense budget that's on page 17?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing we wanted to do as we're going from the fee-based model to the per participant account is we wanted to look at what the ERISA budget is now today, and then how we're going to reallocate those funds that are left over. So as Kelly from Prudential has mentioned, they bill in arrears, right? So we want to leave enough in that account so that we don't have to bill people twice, right, Kelly?
Correct.
That's correct. Okay. So kind of what we've done here is we just made a proposed amount to bill each account per quarter. So you see the Prudential fee for the 401k per account is $24 per 457. The Soltis fee, the ICM training budget, the NAGDA fee, potentially a mailing fee, and then just miscellaneous. So you can see that total of that $192,520. So starting billing this way, quarter two, but that first billing cycle, does that happen July 1, Kelly, or is it the 9/30 date?
So we'll have the second for the expense account, per account charge starting in July. So we will bill in arrears, so, the first time they'll see it on their statement, and we'll debit the accounts September 30th.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. So what our recommended amount per quarter is at $12.50. And so we'll have some left over because quarterly is around $50,000 is what we'll need. Right now we have a total of $209,000 in there. So we're going to work with Prudential to figure out how to reallocate the extra budget amount. So.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. So again, this is an estimated budget. What we're trying to do is just look at those, and as requested by Dave, and I know this was others, just kind of look so that we can understand what those costs are, and then try and make sure that the billing that's happening each quarter lines up with that as closely as you can. So, Kelly, is there any comments from Prudential that?
No, the only thing is just remember that, the mailing fee and the miscellaneous fees are around $11,000, it looks like.
So we might want to just make sure we have enough money in there for all the different conferences and things that people go to that are, because what'll end up happening is if you don't have enough money in there, we invoice the county, right? Either if the plan has money, if it doesn't, then if there's any charges from Prudential's side, or if you need anything paid out of the account, we just want to make sure we have enough dollars in there. So I want you to pay particular attention to, the miscellaneous stuff.
Yeah, I had a suggestion of that. I don't know that the training fee is, budget is correct or is not feasible. I don't know what was spent last year or over the last 2 years.
That should be in the expense account. We can break those out for you. We can take a look at that. But as you may recall, you guys go to Soltis's conference, and then Prudential does one every other year as well. And historically, that you've attended those as well. So, and that's not a lot of money, it's, your airfare to wherever it's at, Prudential picks up. Well, maybe they don't though, do they for the governments? They have to pay their own hotel, right? I think so, I'll check on that, but if you wanna me to go back and look at those conference billings over the last 3 years, we can pull them out, let
That'd
you
be
know.
good. Also, I know, we've attended the NAGDA conference.
Right,
We didn't last year, I don't think anyone in the committee went. But in the past, that has happened on occasion too.
Okay.
And I don't recall what the estimate would be there, but,
This was just a membership fee that you gave us, correct, I
yeah,
think, for
we have a
this?
membership fee here,
Yep.
but not the expense. of
Expense,
actually
okay.
attending the conference.
So as a follow-up item, maybe Kelly, if you can let us know, in looking at those expenses for the last 2 years, and then maybe give us those numbers and we can make the adjustment to this estimated budget. And
I guess one question would be.
Yeah, the worksheet of Excel is dynamic, so if we make any adjustments, it will adjust the recommended billing amount. So, yeah, if we can just get those updated. I just went off of kind of what we had sent to Dave previously and what I thought were around the fees amounts, but we can obviously make any adjustments needed.
we'll put that as a follow-up to get estimates from Prudential, and then we can plug it back in. And
But I don't know if any of the committee members intend to attend the NAGDA conference in the fall.
Haven't seen any detail on it. Any
I haven't
detail on
seen
it?
any detail either yet, but that would be something that needs to be added into the budget.
$1,200 probably wouldn't even pay for the solstice conference.
I don't know.
Just the mileage down there and back is.
And the hotel.
We can look back and see how much this conference is cost us. this whole thing. Yeah, I'm guessing it's also more than this amount.
is the fees for that typically come from Prudential in terms of you've invoiced the plan and the plan?
Yeah.
So if, what we get from Kelly should be inclusive of all that, right? Kind of any training as well as any other conferences. Okay.
So I'm pretty sure, Mark might remember.
for the Prudential one, like it's next year in May, right around this time, by the way. I think you guys pay for your hotel and air because of the government status. I think the conference itself, like the meals and that stuff is covered. Can you remember? But did we pick up your hotel, do you remember? You did? Okay, I'll just verify that, just because we really try to keep it,
Sure.
We did pay for the air.
you do pay, yeah, everyone pays for their own airfare, okay.
Okay.
So, okay, I will check those, I can go back and look at the, sign-offs on those. I can work with, the government area for that.
So I would
Yes.
suggest for the budget that it be estimated, anyone who attends that NAGDA conference, I would estimate the reasonable budget amount would be probably $2,000. It might not be
Minimum.
quite that much, but for a budget amount, that would be my. I can get you the information for the estimate.
So we'll make the NAGDA adjustment from 600 and move it up to 2,000 or move it to 2,600?
Well, no, I'd leave the NAGDA fee as a separate line item. at
Okay.
600, But the ICN training budget, maybe we'll want to have two items, one would be the SOLTIS training and one would be the NAGDA conference.
Okay.
Oh, it's right in
That's
front
something
of
I
you.
would say.
Okay, Lindsay, did you capture that? We'll capture the notes, but we want to break out Soltis fiduciary conference as well as the NAGDA, and then we'll put a line item in for each, make those adjustments, and then we can resend this budget back around.
Sure thing, I can do that.
Okay,
But thanks for having this.
Yeah.
This is good.
yeah, like I said, it's an estimate. We'll do that. I think as we get near the end of the year, we'll look at obviously what's accrued, what's sitting in that account today, and then the decision can be made. You've got to typically once a year in that budget, if you do have excess or you don't. If there is excess once a year, we'll help you make the determination how you want that dispersed.
Do we need to approve the quarterly costs before July though? And that July is when we're gonna have the cost.
I think we already approved the $24 amount.
Yep.
We did our, I don't remember.
So-
We adopted the fee policy statement.
Yeah.
I think part of that was to set that as the dollar amount.
Kelly, do you guys start pulling that fee monthly? So in other words, but when you go to pull the fee, 9/30 is gonna be the first statement that they see it. But when will the actual fees get pulled? I'm thinking 9/30. So basically between now and 9:30, whatever adjustment we want to make here, we can have and then give to Prudential, and they can plan that for the 9:30 billing.
Yeah, and I don't anticipate any change from the 24,
Yeah,
because we have enough balance.
Yep.
There it can be an adjustment.
it'll just be an adjustment around those ancillary expenses, correct?
So it's
Had we
gonna,
had this discussion on how much balance we wanted to maintain, or were we gonna try to refund that to participants? when we could?
I don't know if we've ever had set an amount.
No. Do you have any recommendations?
So what I would probably look at doing based on your fee change this year, I mean, you got a pretty healthy amount that's in there right now. What we'd look at is based on fee structure change that's gonna happen, in July, leave that amount in there. That way you'll have a pretty good cushion when we get to the end of the year. We can look and have a pretty good idea. And then, like I said, for ERISA, typically ERISA plans, once a year you go in and look, and if you have excess, you just make a determination of, okay, now we just go ahead and disperse that back. And then I think that'll give you an idea going into January 2020 of how to look at that, that budget, refine it a little bit so that you can, keep from having too much that accrues there over the course of a year.
Yeah, I would guess maybe 6 months. Running balance, more or less.
Something like that.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
So. Okay.
yeah, most reallocations are done at the end of the year. I
Yeah.
agree with you, Tyler.
Yep.
And having, then one full quarter of knowing what's, been taken out.
Yeah. And timing wise, correct me, Kelly, I think it varies for each provider, but Prudential, I think timing wise, when you guys really do that annually, it's around February that actually in
Well,
terms of
we
like
do it whenever you ask us to do it. The true up that we just
the
did.
true up, yeah.
So we won't have a true up anymore.
Yeah.
Because we're doing fee levelization
Okay.
as well.
Yep.
So just to refresh everybody's memory what that means, so as you recall, you got the true up earlier this year. That will go away because we're going to, when and if we have any funds that continue to share revenue, it used to just go back into, because we always shared revenue, went back into the ERISA budget. Now we have the ability to actually get that back to the participant. So that will go back to the participant, so there won't be that, for lack of a better term, slush fund, right, from revenue sharing. It'll go back to the people that participated in the fund that shared revenue. So it will be more important for you to know how much you want to keep in your account because
Yep.
it's coming directly from the participants.
Are we getting interest or anything from what we have in the account?
It's on, the interest is applied what you have on the guaranteed income account. So I did just look up NAGDA quick if you want to know what the conference is going to be. So it goes by, it's a sliding scale anywhere between 1 and 20 representatives, but it looks like there's a membership fee, and then there's a conference fee of anywhere from $14.75 to $12.75, depending on how many. The member fee is $600. If you're a current member, which I think some of you are, members of NAGDA. And then $1,375 or $1,475, so make your decision before July 16th and pay your bills, because you'll save $1,000 a person. That's basically what it's saying. So you have to have that in by July 16th.
So they don't, do they have dates for that? And
Yeah, the dates are September 8th through 11th in that boring old city called New Orleans.
Okay. One last item that was, just in conjunction with that, as I mentioned earlier, we've worked to have a fee policy statement that sets forth the criteria on how fees are allocated and collected for the plans. We've updated that to reflect the structure that's going into place July 1st. So I'll just take you to page 27 of the packet. This is the page that indicates that. So at the very top of that, where it says allocation of plan administrative expenses, the plan sponsor, in its discretion, has elected to allocate plan level administrative expenses in the following method, which is plan level per capita. Each participant is charged an equal share of the general plan expenses. So we've updated your fee policy statement to reflect the per participant fee structure that will go into place July 1st for that. You'll notice down here there's a adoption for signature. This is like your investment policy statement. It's not a contract, it's a fee policy statement that can be altered or changed. I think just in terms of us, we're fine if you want to sign it and we'll file it, or two, just have a vote in terms of adoption for that policy statement for the plan, and we'll note that going forward.
What say you, Dave? Just go to the,
Yeah,
Board?
we'd make a recommendation to the board to adopt it, and then it would be approved by the Board of County Commissioners.
so is this actually ready to go?
Yeah, it's,
Then we could
so it's
put
updated to reflect the
Okay.
July 1 structure that will go into effect.
Does it need to reference the date that it's adopted in the fee policy statement?
We'll typically put that on there,
Okay,
just to show when it, when it was implemented.
I don't know if it makes a difference, but Prudential's fee was implemented in January.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that we had this in our current fee policy statement. Isn't that what's
So we,
in it currently?
yeah, what we did in the fee policy statement in the draft, it lays out all the three types of ways in which you can allocate those. And what we did is when we moved to this plan, we just then go in. What we've done basically is check the box saying this is how they want to do it. And then what we did is just eliminate the other options in the plan, or the other options on how you could allocate it to just, so it basically just states specifically how you're doing it. So that's really the only update that's there to the fee policy statement.
So is this a part of the agenda item dealing with the proposed municipal budget?
Yeah, this was part of the fiduciary governance, it's just making sure that we provide the update, sorry.
Then I would move that we recommend to the Board of County Commissioners the adoption of this fee policy, the updated fee policy statement.
we have a second?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Okay. Moving on, we'll go to the plan investment review. If we start on page 36, there's a breakdown of each plan, the underlying investments and the assets in each investment for each plan. You've got a weighted expense ratio for each plan that you can see just in terms of the investment expenses that are being borne. Obviously, in terms of the investment policy statement, that's one of the criteria that we look for and watch carefully. So you can see each of those breakdowns. We also track the movements of the plan. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see we're looking at the way the plan was allocated and what the dollar values were a year ago as of 3/31 to where they are today. And the reason we do that is to kind of watch, just make sure that you don't see participants chasing after return or maybe moving significant dollars one place or the other. And we monitor that just in terms of how we educate and talk to participants in there. So we don't see big movements among those. If you look from last year to this year across all three plans, you see pretty consistent numbers, and so that's a positive, meaning that most people aren't making dramatic changes, and sometimes that's appropriate, but a lot of times it may not be. So it's something that we kind of look for. On page 39 is just a quick summary, a one-page summary of the quantitative and qualitative criteria that is in the investment policy statement that we're following. And then, of course, beginning on page 40 and beyond are the following reports that tie directly into the investment policy statement. We have, on page 40, you'll notice there's we have 3 managers that are on watch. I'll take just a minute on one. The other 2, the Janus Henderson Flexible Bond and the JP Morgan U.S. Equity. If you look from the previous meeting notes, the recommendation was there, and in terms of moving those funds, the Janus Henderson Flexible Bond to the Metropolitan West, and then the JP Morgan U.S. Equity to Oakmark, which were approved. I think the one question we had is if those were approved at the commissioner level. We know we've held them because we have the collectives that are ready to go in as well, and so have them all go in at one time, so you've got all the fund changes happening at once. But we just wanted to confirm that if we need to wait further on those 2 fund changes that were discussed, or if they've been approved by the commissioners.
I'm sure they're approved by the commission.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Okay.
They were added to the agenda early on.
Okay. Perfect. The one that I'll report on then is the JP Morgan Small Cap Value. And this is on page 44 and 45. Dennis Rule is the manager that's been on this fund, and he's been there since 2005 and has nearly 2 decades of experience there. We've been watching this fund. It's actually been on watch for about a year. The manager's a good manager and has had good tenure. The fund has unfortunately underperformed in the last year. Their 3-year number's a little bit off. 5-year number's even a little bit off. And so we've been pretty patient with this manager, but as we've seen some movement in this space in the year to date in the last 4 or 5 months, the manager hasn't given up more. He's kind of kept up with the market. But it is one that we've continued to look at, and it hasn't been very consistent throughout the cycle in performing. And so as we look at and take time with this manager and have done additional due diligence, we feel like the Janus Henderson Small Cap Value is a manager that we have a higher level of conviction in terms of having within the plan. So if you look at page 44, as usual, we've mapped out just a direct comparison between the 2 managers. As you look there, you'll look that other than that 10-year number, which is very close, Janus Henderson has been a stronger and more consistent fund throughout the cycle. From a manager standpoint, also has, our manager there has been there a long time and has done a very good job. If you look in the bottom under expense ratio, there's a pretty good advantage. Janus Henderson is a lower expense by about 18 basis points. And then if you look over at on the middle right, we look at consistency, whereas the Janus Henderson fund has been more consistent in terms of being in that first and second quartile, which is one of the things that we look for those managers and being their peer group. And so our recommendation is that we replace the JP Morgan Small Cap Value with the Janus Henderson Small Cap Value Fund. I'll pause there. Questions around that recommendation?
Is there any, concern with waiting until after we make all the changes to the plans that we have coming up in July?
No. You mean waiting to do this until then?
Right.
No, I mean, it'll be, like all fund changes, it'll be a 30-day plus notice, so it'll likely happen right around that time that's happening.
Any other questions?
Yeah, first I gotta check the
Okay.
check to make sure we have it, and then,
You do, because we have in other plans.
oh, you have
Yep.
it, okay, so we have it, so I can take the check mark on that one.
Okay.
Because we're still right at the cusp of that.
So can you add this into the other changes that
We're
we're?
trying, we're
Yeah,
gonna see.
that's what we're
We're gonna attempt to.
working to try and do. So they'll go through in one fell swoop, hopefully. We'll let Kelly work her magic.
Well, yeah, we're trying, because we've had quite a few, but we should be, we'll see.
Okay.
Shoot an email out right away.
So will we first need a recommendation from this committee to the commissioners to make that change?
Yeah. I was just looking to see how many assets we have in that.
Let me go there quick. You've got,
6 million? Is that, am I looking at the right one?
let me look here. You've got
Oh, 2.
in the
It
401k.
only has one plan, yeah, so you just gotta add them together.
So if you've got 2 million in the 401k, you've got 500,000, so 2.5 million in with the 401a, and then with the 457, you've got another 320,000. So you've got about 2.8 million total
Okay.
in assets in that fund.
Yeah, and that shows 2.1 right
Okay.
there, so that's pretty close.
Yep. Anyone have any other questions about this?
The only question I have, Ralph, is that are we gonna have to hold this up to get commissioner approval for this fund? Or are we just gonna put it in with all the other funds?
No, it'll have to have commissioner approval.
But
Okay.
I think you can put it in, we can have commissioner approval by next Tuesday. We can
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Okay, so we're gonna assume we have it. The problem is we
I wouldn't hold it.
have to have your approval to, you know how I send you the approvals? For us to move forward to get it on the list, I'll need your approval.
Just to get it on the list?
Uh-huh.
Okay, but then we'll follow.
I mean, if you have to pull it off, you have to pull it off, but, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do need your client approval to get it on the list, and I don't think we wanna wait till next Tuesday. So I'll send you an email later today that is approving to add this to the fund change.
And
and
then
it-
we'll follow up with the commission.
Right, and so, yeah, so just remember to email me if they, for whatever reason, don't approve. I can't imagine they won't, but that's our process, is that until we have client approval, we can't move forward.
Effectively, we put it in the queue, and then if
Right.
for some reason the approval didn't come, we just pull it.
Okay,
I'll make the motion, we, make the recommendation to the commissioners, Board of County Commissioners, to change from the JP Morgan Small Cap Fund to the, Janus Henderson.
okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
If we can get that on the agenda, we can get by Tuesday. That,
It's all on you, Mark. No pressure.
It's not fair.
Okay, the last item around the investment menu is, we want to just discuss briefly the moving to the collectives. So we've talked with the committee, we've run those numbers, the collectives are up and running, we appreciate Prudential's help. I want to make sure the committee hears this, because normally Prudential has a pretty significant fee to add these type of funds, these collectives. They've been really good, we've worked with them, and Prudential has agreed to waive all of the fees for setting these up on their platform. So Utah County is obviously a very important client. We have some others as well. But just want to acknowledge Prudential's help in doing that, because it's not cheap. You've got to pay the fee there's a pretty significant fee for each one. And when you're talking 10 or 15 funds, that can add up pretty quick. So, and those are fees, of course. Soltis we don't get any compensation from using the collective, so they would just be borne by the shareholders. So we appreciate Prudential's willingness to work there. So those are up and running. They're in process right now of getting put on the platform. We've worked through that. There's one slight nuance to that is there's one target date. The collectives we have are for vintages. So you have them by dates, 2020, 2030. The ones we set up are for vintages that haven't expired. So in other words, there's a 2010 that's in your plan. And there's two things. One, we didn't set up collectives for those. One, because they're expired, and two, because they typically come with fees to set them up. And then third is the 2010 version, or the 2010 vintage, the expenses, because it's mostly fixed income, is actually cheaper than the collective. And so that is that's the one fund in your plan that we won't replace with a collective. So 2020 and everything above will all move to the collectives. And you'll go from expense ratio of about 0.72 for those down to about 0.44. So that's the type of reduction that you get. And we've included that in the packet, but those are ready to go and move forward, and that'll be part of the fund change that happens. But we want to communicate just the 2010, one, because it would cost more to move it, and two, it's an expired vintage, and I think we would probably argue it might make sense that even from an education standpoint, we look at those participants that are in there. Because if they're not retired, the fund is behaving as if they were. So we might want to have a conversation with them about maybe picking a better investment if they're continuing to work and contribute to the plan.
So where will the money be moved to?
It'll just stay in there.
It'll
So,
stay there.
yep, so what you're gonna see is SIA 2020 by T-Row price, SIA 2030, but then the T-Row 2010 will just remain as is. So the participants or the monies in that fund they'll remain unchanged.
Was that, initially on plan to be moved?
We
Was
had-
this a change to our original plan?
We had initially looked at all of them to do that, but it was when we came back and looked at, the expense to move, obviously the reason to move the collective, the biggest driver is because you save so much in expense, but
Yeah,
for that
it
vintage, with it being higher.
makes sense not to move it. I'm just wondering if there's anything we need to change in our original documentation for these.
We certainly can. We ran the, yeah, we,
Handle it internally too.
yeah, yeah. We certainly can. Obviously, the fund notice hasn't gone out, so, but we certainly can in that documentation go back and list out the expired vintages that won't be moving.
Yeah, let's do
Okay.
that.
Lindsay, we'll make sure that's in the notes, but we'll make sure we get that correction done and clarified.
Okay.
Okay, the other question that we have there is, in each of these plans, you have these set up in 10-year vintages. So 2020, 2030, 2040, 2050. We have set up in these 5-year vintages, so every 5 years, 2025, 2030, 2035. And so one of the questions for the committee is, would you like to add or use the 5-year vintages along with the 10-year in the plan when we make this change? There's pros and cons to both. Obviously, the argument for would be, hey, you have a 5-year increment, meaning you're going to get somebody's age a little bit closer to their actual retirement date. In some cases, not in every case, but in a fair amount, you'll get them a little bit closer. When you look at allocation, there's a slight difference between a 5-year vintage and the 10-year, so you do see some change there. The downside would be, hey, do you really want to add more to the plan? It's enough, or whatnot, but we have the option to do it, so it's really kind of a preference of the committee.
I'm of the opinion not to add any more, and go with the 5-year plan, but I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say.
What do you commonly see?
Most of our plans use the 5 and the 10-year vintages.
Both.
Mhm. But not all, and I will say it's a preference of looking at how many funds you offer, and
Does it cost any more to go with 5?
no.
Some
How many
people-
funds would that give us if we added all?
It would add 5 more.
So we're at how many currently?
You are at, well, you have, it would take you from 5 in the retirement target dates to 10. And then total it would take you from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It'd take you from 19 to 24 total.
I'm just of the opinion we have enough plans already to choose from. That's my opinion. So, but it's,
Some,
I kind of feel the same way.
some people may think though they can't retire except on the 10-year.
good, we get them.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Right, could be mixed. Yeah, I think there's enough choices, and I don't think the variation between the allocations is that significant. That's my opinion.
I think we would tend to agree. We would say, depending on the plan preference, if you look at the allocations, the glide path, between the 5-year increments, it's some, but it's pretty minimal in terms of what the actual change is. You'd also have to make the determination of how do you map, and you'd just, so in other words, somebody that's in a 2020, if they're closer to the 2025, rather than moving to the 2020, you'd have to map them to the 2025, et cetera, so. Okay.
Yeah,
That would take, yeah,
yeah, I think we wanna hold off on that.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. We'll make that note and plan to do it. That makes it a little simpler on probably all fronts.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the report and review on the investment side. I want to make sure, if there's no questions there, we can move to Prudential's report. I know with the 401A and some of the things that are happening there, we want to make sure and give Kelly and Carol plenty of time to go through and spend time there, so.
Couple questions, if I could.
Yes,
First, page 13, you have the compliance calendar.
yes.
Does that reflect what we did in 2018?
No, the,
Plan for 2019?
what the compliance calendar is, it's just a calendar we place in there to help our plans. It lays out all of the important dates from a regulatory standpoint, notices, things like that happen to apply. So it's just,
Does that read 2019 instead of 2018?
yes, yeah, it should read 2019.
And then on page 29, you have an economic update. Is there any comments that you have for us regarding that?
Certainly.
Can you tell us when the China issue?
When we can no longer see 600-point down days. If you go to page 31, I'm happy to spend just a minute or two here. So one of the things that we do, obviously, we have our investment committee that's chaired by Bill Wallace, who's our chief investment officer. And one of the things that we do is we look at these economic indicators, but we look at them not from just one firm or two, but we do what we hope is a thorough job of looking at a lot of really good research firms that look at this data, and then we try and make a decision around what we see and what we do. So these are what we call key indicators. These are some of what are called leading indicators. We watch these things very closely because typically economic booms or depressions come from, or recessions. Typically, these indicators will begin to lead or show signs that those things are coming, and so we watch them very closely. So I'll just go down through these real quick. If we look at growth, and maybe before I touch on each of these, what I'd say is when we look at the overall economy, fundamentally we see a lot more good than bad. There's certainly some risks that we see in today's economies, both here in the U.S. and globally, but we also see a lot of good. And the good is more so than the risk that we see. From a growth standpoint, here in the U.S., obviously GDP growth is something that's very important. It's picking up. We have struggled at 1.5, 2 for the last 7 or 8, 9 years, and we're starting to see that. As you can see here, annual rate of year over year about 2.97 at the end of fourth quarter. And we actually think we're going to be close to 3.5% this year, which is a much healthier growth rate number in terms of economic growth. The likelihood of that reversing to where we see negative growth and head into recession, we think is pretty low. Not impossible, but pretty low. Around jobs and unemployment, I'm sure the county feels much like many employers around. It's pretty difficult to find people that want to work. I shouldn't say people that want to work, but it's hard to find employees because there's lots of good jobs. For the first time in I think 47 years, there's actually more openings for employment than there are total unemployed people in the country. So our unemployment rate is at a very low rate, which is a very healthy sign. Valuations, in terms of when we talk valuations, it's the price of the stocks or the price of the market. If you look at the market right now, one of the concerns is, hey, we've had some pretty good strong markets. Are we getting ahead of ourselves to where things are overpriced? And that typically leads to a downturn in the market. If you look right now at the end of 3/31, and obviously after today, what you're going to, after what we've seen in May, these numbers are very close to where their 25-year averages sit. So what that says to us is that we feel like the market's pretty fairly valued. There's certainly pockets that might be a little pricier than others. There's certainly pockets where that we still see a little bit of value in. But just in terms of overall valuation, we see the market being pretty fairly priced, which again is a good sign. Interest rates, the Federal Reserve, that's one of the risks of, hey, with growth picking up, will the Federal Reserve raise rates quicker and therefore stymie growth? Actually, last week the Federal Reserve kind of hinted that they might be more willing to even cut a rate by the end of this year as opposed to raise it. I think what they're trying to signal to the market is they're trying to be very accommodative, that they don't raise rates too quickly that would put an obstacle in front of economic growth in doing that. And then inflation and dollar. As we see inflation's actually starting to pick up. While every economist that I've ever been around tries to explain to me why inflation's good, but I don't know, whenever I go to the store and have to pay more for the same stuff I paid for 6 months ago, it doesn't feel very good to me. But there is a healthy level of inflation that you want in a growing economy, and we're starting to see that inflation come into line with more of a healthy type of inflation rate or an average. It's been below that on a number of things, and so that's typically cause for concern around that. The dollar, obviously the international rhetoric that's happening right now around the tariff discussion is having some impact there. If the dollar is strong, your U.S.-based investments tend to get a boost. If the dollar weakens, your international investments tend to get a boost. If you look at the dollar historically, it's pretty strong right now. And if you were to ask us over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we think it'll likely be that you'll see the dollar weaken a little bit because the international markets are growing and they're starting to show some pretty good signs as well. And then, of course, recession risk. I mean, one of the things that we look at is, hey, what are the risks out there? What's the likelihood we could go into a recession, which would certainly trigger a downturn in the market? And there's certainly some things. You've got some countries like North Korea that a little bit of a wild card, and they're not a big player in the overall economic global picture, but they can create some noise, which certainly ripples through the system. So those are some of those issues that we look at. But overall, as we look at the underlying fundamentals of the market, we think that the level or the risk for recession, which is defined by two consecutive quarters or more of negative economic growth or economic contraction, we think that that's pretty low. So our overall outlook on the economy is that we feel like there's a lot more healthy about it than is unhealthy, and the risks that are out there are ones to be careful and be watchful of, but not ones to, I guess what I would say is we feel like the opportunities outweigh the risks, so we're managing a little bit more to the opportunities.
Thanks.
Okay. Kelly, we'll turn it over to Prudential, and I'm a little bit jealous. I think your book's thicker than ours.
Well, it's gonna get thinner in June, so we're gonna knock out one of these plans, so. If you wanna start on page 4, we'll just talk really quickly about the plan asset summary. So the total combined plan assets at the end of the quarter were $160,606,012. And then you'll see below how it breaks out with each plan. I did just check as of close last night in the plans. We had a little bit of a volatile week last week, and it doesn't look like this week is starting to be any better, because I just checked the market, and it's down 600 points today, so. But it closed on Friday at $162,358,287, so we did have some growth there since 3/31. We want to go ahead then and move to tab 2. We'll just review the expense account activity, because we made some changes. We had some suggestions from the committee on how we could make this a little more user-friendly. So Carol took some time and went over how we broke it out above. If you can see now that we changed a few of the, so they're a little bit more understandable, meaning we've got like the Prudential revenue credit instead of, I can't remember what it said, but that lets you know what the revenue credits were. We have earnings, we have invoices for the advisors. So we had it broken out with some of the past people's names, because like from 2015-16, we just condensed that into what we call the prior Utah personnel expenses. And then we broke it out for the any current committee member that may have some expenses, we put their name up there. If you go to the very end, we've got NAGDA billing, Prudential billing, and then she's got an asterisk sitting there, what the asterisk means, like for the miscellaneous, or,
It should be on the bottom.
oh, there it is. Fees for plan amendments, annual notices, and other charges is what we're gonna name that. And then we have one column for reallocation, so you can see in what year we did reallocations to the plan. Then if you turn, and so this is all throughout, for the last 3 years. If you turn to page 13, it was asked if we could do a total by plan, and then together. So she breaks it out by plan, by year. So is that kind of what you're looking for, Dave?
This is great.
Okay.
All right. You're welcome.
So so now we can really just look at the current plan expenses and then the total for the 3 plans, so that kind of shows you where they're at. And then, of course, after July 1st, we'll have just 2 plans. Okay? So I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time on the demographics, because I think I'd like to leave some time to talk about where we're at with the plan merger, where we're at with the fund changes, and then discuss the upcoming meetings that we have coming up for employee meetings in June. And just really kind of hammer down so Lindsay and I can both hear what you would like discussed at those meetings, okay? So we'll just go ahead and look at page, just the page that talks about how the plan is sitting right now, page 19. And I'm just gonna really do that for the 401K, because that's where the match goes into. So as of the close of the quarter, we had about 1,300 total participants with 985 active participants. These 13 other participants is something that we, Carol works on to, we change status, like they retire, or they move from one plan to another or something, so they fall into this other participant. And if you wanna know, down below, they have the, 2 asterisks where it kind of breaks out what that means. Participants who are not active, terminated, or suspended, but have an account balance greater than 0. So we have 13 of those right now. Average participant balance is about $80,000, with the median participant balance being about 40. And then, for those, 60 and older, they hold, more than half of the assets at about $61 million in the plan. And you can see with our distributions for the quarter, we're down from the quarter before at about 1.65, with some cash rolling out at about 377,000, and then the other is what rolled out in rollovers. So that was about a 1.6% distribution from the plan, which is good and usually below average. So the total plan sitting now, it says 105, I have it at, as of yesterday. And I'll just tell you what those 3 break out. So as of yesterday, the 401K was at 106,606,000. The 401A was at 32,727,000, and the 457 was just over 23 million. Okay. So if we want to talk a little bit about, I just wanted to update the committee where we're at on the merger of the 401A and the 401K. Actually, I might have Carol talk about that because I don't get on all those internal calls. So yeah, I don't know if I can get this up there.
Okay, so with regard to merging the 401A into the 401K plan, we are on target. We have been working diligently with the committee to make sure that those things happen. One challenge that we have are with loans, because you could have somebody that has a 401K loan as well as a 401A loan, and when we get rid of the 401A plan and merge it into the 401K, we have to make sure that the numbers aren't going to bump into each other so that they get posted correctly. So there will be some loan numbers that have to be renumbered when we do the merger. So I think that that's a project that is being worked on and will continue to do so until the blackout occurs where no new loans can take place. So we've worked with Utah County as far as the timing. So right after the 6, I don't know what the pay date is, 6/9 perhaps. Right after that payroll is processed and those contributions are made, blackout notices are going out as we speak. So your participants will be aware of the fact that there'll be this small period of time, 5 days at the most, but probably less, where we'll need to sort of freeze the 401A plan so that we can go ahead and take those assets and merge them into the 401K plan. But it should be pretty minimal disruption, and participants will be notified in advance so that they know if they want to do any transfer of funds or if they want to take out a new loan or a withdrawal or what have you, that they should do so before that blackout begins. And when all is said and done, we will end up with 2 plans. Any new 401A contributions will subsequently be made into the 401K plan. So we have a separate source already set up and ready. So whenever those contributions come in after the merger takes place, they'll funnel through the 401K. And then eventually you'll have just 1 loan per participant once the 401A loans have been paid off in total by, attrition, so. Is there any questions about the merger?
So with the 5-day freeze, that doesn't mean that the funds won't be earning during those 5 days.
The funds will never be out of the market. It's just that participants won't be able to take their
Just can't
money.
make any
Yeah,
changes, right?
because we need to have time to record keep and put them on the 401K.
So the effective date of the merger would be June, you said?
June 10th, I think, is what we're shooting for the effective date, and I think that we're anticipating blackout to come out maybe June 15th. if not sooner.
So that really kind of parlays us into our next, what we wanted to talk about and make sure everybody, if they have any questions, is that we're working on some meetings in June that we're gonna discuss and have participants be able to come and look at the new financial wellness website, the new, cause they all have it now, right? So you all have the new financial wellness website. So we're gonna talk about financial wellness, do a little bit of education there. We're going to review all the changes to the plan so that they understand, because I think it's really important that they understand why they got a $24 charge coming out and now they're getting another one, right? So I think having us there answering those questions and not just an educator, I'll be there. And I think Lindsay said those dates work for her as well. And we're doing 4 meetings, 2 days in a row. We're doing 3 here at the administration building the first day, and then an evening to catch the second shifters at the sheriff's department. And then we're getting up at 6 and doing a 6 o'clock meeting at the sheriff's department to catch the night timers and the early timers, and then coming here and doing 3 more meetings. So we'll be working with Ralph and Brandon and Lindsay to make sure that we have all the slides that we need. We'll go over some of like the new mobile app has new features on it. We'll go over some of the financial wellness tools. We'll have Lindsay, if she wants to talk about what she does on a monthly basis here at the county, and then just be there for questions, because we're doing, fee levelization, we're doing the account charges, we're merging the plans. There's a lot going on. So I just wanted everybody to know that we're taking a concerted effort to make sure everybody is notified and understands.
Right, and I think if you can emphasize the fact that reduces the expenses to the participants.
Right.
We're gonna have questions about why we're doing this, and I think that's what I see a lot more.
Yeah, and the transparency as well, like they see now.
The fees, the transparency, and
Mhm.
the merger to reduce it.
Right,
Well, that's been the ongoing, questions we've been getting is, why and how does this benefit me? And we've done our best to try to explain that, but I think you guys can do a lot better
right.
than we have, and so I think this is really important. Are you planning on having some examples of differences by, different account?
I'm hoping
balances?
Lindsay and the Soltis group can help us with that, because that's tough to get through our compliance.
Okay.
But I'm
Just-
hoping
Yes.
maybe they
Yes.
will be able to
I mean, we'll
help
go
us with
through
that.
Okay.
and say, hey, let's just use an example account and show them and take them through.
I think that would be very useful for our
Yeah.
employees to see different examples of account, balances and
Yep.
what it means with the different fee, changes,
Yep.
so. Great.
Well, we can send out a fee level, so we can send out a fee levelization and the per account charge. So there's a regulatory notice that goes when we do like a per account charge. And we can also send one out for like fee levelization. But they're pretty, like hard to explain, but we can mail those when we mail all the other things, the fund changes, and then we can have the letter available.
Okay, I think that'd be really good if it was at least around the time that
Yeah.
we'll be here to answer questions,
Okay.
because most.
I'll show you the letter, and maybe
Yeah.
it just makes sense to have it at the meeting where
Yeah,
people can
I think
take it.
that'd be great, because there's an assumption being made when they see those numbers that they're paying more. It's just, it's an interesting thing that happens, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not the case.
I think we can help them with that from what they were paying from,
Yeah, we're
significantly
25
more.
years of having this conversation of, hey, our fee's always been explicit, so we've had to try and refine our ability to talk to participants, help them understand that, yeah, you've never seen a fee before. There's a
That's
there's a
exactly
reason.
true. They haven't seen the fee.
But
they
you do
don't
see
know
it
if
now,
they're
and this is
paying
what it
less.
actually is, yeah.
Right. They're paying-
Have those dates been set for June
Yeah, 12th and 13th.
12th and 13th? And are you going out with an email? Is
Yeah,
that how
Brandon's
we're
gonna be
notified?
advertising those, so
Okay.
he's all over it.
Okay.
In fact, probably pretty quick.
Yeah, it'd probably be good to get it kind of on the calendar fairly quick, and as people are going about their vacations and other things in June.
And I don't know if it makes sense, but we can request posters for the meetings if there's any places you hang them, break rooms, or
Most departments in the break rooms do have places for that.
would
think
you
we
like,
should
if
get
you
some
want me, I could
posters.
get some of them ordered.
Yeah, let's order posters.
Okay.
For sure. Let's try to get something out by the end of the week.
Okay.
Cause you've got a lot of the stuff for it already, right? Haven't they sent you out
That's
the,
crazy.
some of the brochures and the pens and
Think
stuff?
we've seen-
Brandon? I think you've gotten boxes of stuff already, right?
It's coming.
Did any posters come? Do you remember?
Don't know if I'd be close to that.
Okay, I'll check. Are there any other, demographics or anything that you want me to go over? It really hasn't changed quarter over quarter as I reviewed it. I really wanted to make sure we spent enough time on all the changes and any questions you might have for that.
Let's see, I had something I just wanted to run by you. I think I had it.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Well, infrastructure fees. My understanding is that we don't have any. The question comes because of some, a lawsuit that I read about. For Fidelity, I did my lawsuit, with regard to, allegedly secret 401k fees that were actually titled as, infrastructure fees. We don't have anything like that.
I've never seen anything on our expense schedule that says anything like that.
I just wanted to raise the issue because I didn't think we did either, but I just wanted to verify that.
Did they define what an infrastructure fee was?
Not in great detail, but there were some payments that said that the amount of tens of millions of dollars, which they claimed with plaintiffs was that those weren't adequately disclosed.
Did they win or lose?
And they're called infrastructure fees.
Has it been settled? No. Tyler, I don't know if
Fidelity
you,
hasn't settled a lawsuit,
yeah.
so, I mean, they're,
Do you know what
they're
they're
not-
talking about?
I've seen some pretty creative ways in which fees have been labeled. I've seen value add. Here's a fee for value add, which I don't, so.
Anyway?
Well, yeah. So it's, yeah, I mean, I've seen some pretty creative ways in how fees have been listed and things, but.
So do they typically charge the fee and then squirrel the money away and then use it for various things, or?
So where a lot of these have come to light is when the regulation for 4AP2, which now they gotta disclose it to you, so they've got to line item it, and then you've got plans that are finally going, hey, you're titling this infrastructure, explain to me what that is and why it is. I mean, I've heard them explain I've heard a provider say, hey, we charge this extra fee because we take the money and we reinvest in our business to make sure we're a really good business and a really good 401k provider. So it's, I think in the per participant structure and the new one, it cleans that up a lot to where in that new structure, that it'd have to be disclosed and looked at, but.
Yeah, the quote was, in this article, we receive a fee from some of those mutual fund companies who compensate us for maintaining the infrastructure that is needed to make those funds available.
Yeah.
So do you remember the fees that Tyler was talking about to add to the platform? That might be the infrastructure.
Yeah, it might be.
fees.
Maybe.
I mean,
might
and
be.
if you think about it, I think that possibly could be. When you're putting other people's funds on your platform, right? There's a cost to doing that. Someone's setting it up, someone's monitoring it, someone's getting the fund fact sheets, you know what I mean? It is an inexpensive thing to do. And so maybe that's what but they should
Could
be
be.
just disclosing it, right?
Yeah, it could be.
So,
And the other issue I wanted to just address, I saw also an article dealing with plan participant data and using plan participant data for purposes of cost setting. We don't do any of that, right?
we do not.
That's my assumption.
Mhm.
I just really appreciate that compliment.
Right, we do not. So financial wellness is a broader term. We do have Prudential Financial, which is, I like to finally call her Mother Prue, has Link, and we talked about Link last time, remember? So really what that is just another layer of education. So what's been happening through financial wellness as they go through their tools, as they go through their budgets, as they go through their life insurance calculator, they need a place to ask questions and get more information on certain things. We do now have Link that they can either call or do a chat button, that they can talk to a registered investment advisor who is a non-commissionable salaried employee at Prudential, who helps them with suitability of product, takes them through an investment, what's right for you, questionnaire, and then they can choose whether or not they wanna continue with a Prudential person outside or go to their own person. But we don't cross-sell, no, we don't, actively go out and ask anybody to buy anything from us, ever.
And then they incur that fee directly with that outside advisor.
Correct.
If they decide they want to.
If they decide they want to, correct.
Thank you.
Where are we at?
Anything else on Prudential side?
Unless there's more questions, I think we've got most everything covered.
I think we may have a public comment. If I could open it up for public comment to anyone who may be in the audience today.
Yeah, Brandon Chambers, employee here at Utah County. Wanted to make one comment known to the investment committee. It's regarding the recent changes to the way that fees are structured. One thing that I've been notified by former employees who terminated is the $50 transaction fee. Utah County does have time-limited employees that we put 7.5% of their earnings into a 457 account. Sometimes these employees only work for 1 week, 2 weeks, very limited, very special projects where they may only get $100, $150 into this 457 account. And the way that it's structured, when they terminate and they go to take that money out of the 457, they're being charged a $50 fee to do that. And so what I'd like the investment committee to consider and review is setting sort of a low limit on zero transaction fees for small balances, such as any account that has $1,000 in it. We don't charge that $50 for it, whatever seems appropriate for that, even if that means that transaction fee needs to go up slightly for the other individuals that may have a higher balance when they remove that. But trying to make it a little more fair and equitable for some of these employees that really don't spend a lot of time at the county and do have money invested in Prudential and don't want them to be kind of unfairly penalized by that $50 transaction fee.
Thanks, Brandon. I'm curious, either Soltis or Prudential, considering the whole intent of the fee changes to make it the same so that we don't create any issues.
So those are
anytime for us
actually
out.
participant transaction fees that Prudential had implemented about a year ago, a little over a year ago, across the board to all of our clients.
Oh, really?
Yes, everybody got them, nobody got eliminated, and really, that really was just from, as the market kind of shifted from a bundled product that we saw, even up to 5, 7 years ago, where we just gave you a price and it was higher, right? But we bundled a lot of those services in, the mailing services, the checks, the loans, the, participant balances, all of those, we just bundled into the product. And as we started feeling some fee compression from our clients and wanted to be able to stay competitive in the marketplace, we went ahead and did that, but then we initiated across the board through all of our clients, no matter what size, participant-initiated fees. And I think that's one that you're speaking of, because they're taking a distribution from the 457.
Yeah.
Are they rolling it in, or what are they doing with it? They just want to take it, or, see, that's a little bit of the problem. And I
Yeah.
can certainly go back and see if we can negotiate something on that 457 plan, on small balances. I mean, I don't think that we're, I can't give you a 100% answer, but I don't think we're inflexible to those people where it becomes a detriment. It just was something that we did to everybody across the board.
I see.
So before, we take it any further, I'd like to take it back and see if that's anything that we can tweak your participant, because of the plan and the way it's structured and those limited term employees. If we might be able to put a limit on that and not take the fee until it's not 5% of the, of their total balance.
Yeah, we met with the firefighters today, and we hire 50 seasonal firefighters or more every year, and many of them work for one season, and so they do get the 457. It's their money, and yet at the end of the season they may have $100 in there, and then they want to take it out because they're not planning on coming back.
Yeah, let me check that for you, because I like I said, that was something that we just yeah, everybody got the same contract, everybody got the same thing. But I don't think that, you know, we're that inflexible that we couldn't look at something like that, so I'll
Anything
report
else,
back.
Brandon?
No, just I was just saying like an example, like in elections, we may bring somebody in only for
Oh, yeah.
7 days or 10 days,
don't want
and
to-
their balance is literally $100. And so when they leave the county, you know, they're probably not returning, maybe next season, maybe next year they might return. But when they call Prudential to remove it, they said, okay, we have $100 in the account, it's gonna cost $50 to get that $100
Could-
out.
Would you be able to send me a couple samples,
Sure.
examples of people that that's happened to?
I can do
That would go a long way in us going back to the powers that be and say, look, this isn't our intent, is to take half their balance, so.
Is that fee to withdraw, or is that fee
It's
to roll?
distribution.
Distribution.
But if you rolled it over into another plan, do you get
You'll
that
still
fee?
get it.
You'd still get it?
Yeah, cause as you're
Transaction fee.
distributing
Because I
from
could
the
see
plan.
it kind of as a detriment to kind of remind people to keep money in their retirement that they put in originally, but if it happens on a rollover as well.
I
then
think it's any transaction.
It's on a transaction basis, and most people don't, you know, I think it's this limited term employee and the small balances that kind of got missed in the picture as we were doing this. So like I said, I think we could probably, you know, come up with a feasible amount, so it's not detrimental, and I'll take that back to our, area that looks at these exceptions
Okay.
and get back to you.
All
Does
right,
does that apply to somebody who's retired and taking it out like $1,000 a month? It's gonna cost
There's
them
a
$50.
one-time withdrawal,
Just one time.
yeah, on a systematic. When you set up a systematic, you get it
Change the
once.
amount, or-
Do you know that answer, if they change the amount?
That's a good question.
I know, you've asked us the question about the systematic, and I did find out it's just the one time, because it just automatically goes like an annuity. Now, if you change the amount, I don't know, so I can ask that question. My guess is no, but it could be yes, because you're changing the system, right? So, like, we can put an indicator in saying, we charged you once, but now if you've changed it, it might actually get in, I'll find out.
I think that maybe just a comment from us is, that's a trend we've seen. In other words, that's not a fee that Prudential's the only one out there charging. And if you recall the RFP process we went through, we actually included those participant-initiated fees so you could get a feel of what Prudential's are versus everybody else's. And Prudential's that's about, we see between about 50 to 75 is a pretty common range for what we see providers charging for those. And I think it would be great. There's some dynamics here that obviously aren't there. So if there's capability to do that, would be.
Well, we're the financial wellness company. We don't want to take half the plan balance, right? That sort of defeats the purpose, so don't worry, I'll go back and lead with that.
All right, thanks. Let's see. So we talked about education, right?
I think that's just the last part. I was gonna say, Lindsay, if you're there, we were just planning to, report on the education efforts that have been done thus far this year, on the number of things that we're doing, and then as well as what's upcoming and what we see towards the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we implemented this year is that we are doing the enrollment meetings on the same day that we're doing our one-on-one meetings. And so that's been really helpful because we're able to be there and it's not 2 additional days, not 2 days in the month. Demand seems really high. You know, if you don't sign up in the first little bit, it's hard to get a spot. So there's a couple things we could do to accommodate that. We can make our one-on-one scheduled times a little bit less, or we could do the time trade calendar where we could do a virtual meeting 1 day of the month as well, or we'll make our calendar available where we could post online meetings for those individuals that aren't being able to meet on those specific days. In the last quarter, we sent out the quarterly flash report, and we also did an understanding debt webinar, and we have our training May 23rd, and we also had our retirement readiness on March 26th. We did have a few county employees, which one of them, I believe, they are retiring at the end of this month. So it was very applicable. So those are the efforts that we're doing. I've included samples of the different reporting. One thing that we could look is with Kelly is targeting the participants that are only in stable value. I know we had started down that road a little bit ago, so we'll continue doing that. And then we'll do the educational on-site meeting that Kelly had discussed for all these fund changes, as well as the billing changes that will occur in the beginning of June.
So page 100 in our packet kind of lays out the calendar education-wise that we lay out and gives you kind of the timing for these things that Lindsay's discussing. As we discussed earlier, we'll certainly plan to be here and participate in June 12th and 13th and make sure we've got information available and some examples that we can help participants go through and understand. I think we just encourage the committee, certainly as you get inquiries or you get employees that have questions, certainly send them our way in doing that. And they can, either if they want to meet with us when we're here or call us. I mean, from 6:30 a.m. till 6 o'clock at night, our advisor team's available to help kind of have those discussions with employees as they have them. Anything else, Lindsay?
That's it on my end.
Okay, I'll just mention we have, we do also quarterly educational webinars, and these are more general topics. And so if you look on page 102 of the packet, we've done 2 already this year. The first one in January was around market volatility. Obviously, November, December of last year were pretty rough. So what we try and do each quarter is have a education session that your participants can dial into that covers a specific topic. We hold them that day. We also record them so that they can listen to them or access them whenever they want. And we send those to you. So Ralph, if you guys can put them on your intranet, we can work to have them accessible however you'd like. But we've got 2 more, one in September and one in October. The one in September, we've had a number of clients that have said, hey, I've got some people that are a little bit more sophisticated. So if you can do a session to talk a little bit more in depth about portfolio construction and diversification. So that'll be the one on September 4th. And then on October 16th, we're planning on principles of long-term investing, just helping clients understand. We know that's enrollment time and helping them understand what they do and when they get enrolled, the impact it has over the long term is very meaningful. And so those are on the schedule. Again, we'll send them to you, and you can send them out to your employees. They can log in, join us during the webinar, or they can access the recording afterwards.
Hey, Tyler, question is that fiduciary training on the 23rd, is that gonna be in webinar form as well? That
Yes.
you can watch?
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll do the same. That'll be webinar accessible. When you register for it, you can choose whether to attend in person or by webinar. And if you choose webinar, you'll get the instructions on how to log into it. It's also recorded. What I'll say is we record it. We have to get permission from outside providers. So we'll have a portfolio manager that's going to be there. Actually, Metropolitan West, who we're replacing and bringing into your plan, the portfolio manager of that fund will be at that training.
Okay.
They don't always give us approval to record them. So we make as much available as we can in the recording, but it's not always 100%, but pretty close. So
23rd.
23rd, yeah, May 23rd from 10 a.m. till 1 p.m.
Are you gonna send out another reminder or?
Yeah, we will. We have a pretty good list of clients that have registered, and then what we typically do is the week of, we'll kind of resend that out, just letting them know here's the time and location and start and finish. And
Okay, perfect.
where to park and what's for lunch and all those.
Okay, anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Hey, we have in front of us a resolution adopting written procedures governing electronic meetings of the Utah County Investment Benefits Committee. Do you want to speak to that at all, Dave, or are we ready to go on that?
If anybody has any questions, this just allows the member of this committee to participate electronically if they would so desire. The anchor location would be here.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Okay.
Electronic meeting.
We have a motion, Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
It's exciting, the digital version of myself is way better than the real one.
That works for all of us. All right, anything else before this committee before we adjourn? All right, thank you.
Apologize for my tardiness.
It's okay.
Still haven't figured out how to be in two places.
Well, now you can do it electronically. You don't have to worry about it. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Adjourned.